year after our board had discussed for about 8 months the change. We were the Central Florida Sports Commission. We had discussed internally and with leadership, Mayor Dyer included, the thought of changing our name to Greater Orlando Sports Commission. I think the most obvious reason for us was very simply when we were out both nationally and internationally pitching our community. The first question was, Central Florida, is that Jacksonville, is that Lakeland, is that Tampa, is that Orlando? And then the second conversation was, well, okay, it's Orlando, who do you represent? That's certainly the city of Orlando, Orange County, Lake Seminole, and Osceola counties. So we feel that the change in branding has led us to eliminate that first question. Certainly the brand and how strong the brand of Orlando is, we wanted to associate ourselves with that. We love the moniker and the shortening of it to Go Sports, and at the same time continue to represent our community. And I think we've eliminated some of the questions, and it's certainly a more direct and focused approach. So we're pleased to be able to make that change, and here we are.
Thanks.
To get into the presentation, I wanted to share with you some details about the MLS All-Star Game coming here on July 31st. And I wanted to start by thanking Mayor Dyer. This project, there was an opportunity for us to bring this here in 2018, and with his leadership and guidance and some conversations with Osceola County, he was able to help us secure the event in 2019. So we really appreciate your leadership on that. Dare I say that we may have lost that opportunity had we not acted swiftly a little bit more than a year ago. The game itself, flipping through to the first page, MLS, as most of us well know, our league here in the United States, a global brand, soccer certainly. The USA, the MLS boasts over 100 million soccer fans, 6 million followers across social media platforms, 30 plus million viewers, and they have key media partnerships globally with 17 different outlets in 90 languages across 170 countries. So no doubt a global brand, MLS, and going into their 5th season here, Orlando City Soccer, certainly with the pride and everything that they've done for our community. The opportunity for us to bid on and win the right to the 2019 All-Star Game was a great step for us, not just as a soccer community, but certainly as a community that is looking to constantly build its resume to be able to host major events. On the next page, what we did was, and this is, there's an awful lot of moving parts here, and our team is here, Jennifer Lastic and Brett Nelson have been instrumental in so much of the work that we've done as a commission and certainly as a community to bring this together. But this is almost completely solidified, but a little bit of a look at what's going to happen, a 5-day event. So we'll call it All-Star Week leading into the All-Star Game on the 31st, with a number of community events and opportunities for youth activation and legacy programming. And we're excited to hopefully finalize this in the very near future. I will share that MLS will have 100 of their top agencies in town for a familiarization tour this Wednesday. We'll be taking them around the community and visiting all of the locations that as we look to finalize the final schedule for MLS, with the All-Star Game, of course, being on July 31st. Here are the details. So certainly, as I mentioned, this is a partnership between the City of Orlando, Osceola County, Orlando City Soccer, MLS, and the Greater Orlando Sports Commission. All-Star Week will start on July 27th and run through the 31st, with the game being the night of the 31st. The location will be at Orlando City Soccer Stadium, and we do expect a sellout with an estimated additional 20 to 25,000 patrons attending additional community events, which we'll host throughout the community. Major media coverage, of course, ESPN, Fox, and Univision. multiple, many opportunities. Certainly the branding and awareness, millions of impressions, and then without saying, it goes without saying that the community benefits are the obvious. International broadcast, marketing and media value and economic impact, community pride and excitement, and certainly a reward for those city soccer fans who have supported our team locally, bringing the best of MLS here into the community. And just as important, as we go into the second topic, an opportunity for us to build our relationship with the international soccer community as we prepare to hopefully be a host community for the 2026 FIFA World Cup. There'll be a week-long takeover, as you saw on the diagram before this, and the projected economic impact is in the range of $6 million with an expected 9,000 hotel room nights over that period of time. Happy to answer any questions as it relates to the All-Star game. Great. Moving on, we have been having many conversations as they relate to World Cup, and I think this all started with a letter to Mayor Dyer on July 10th of 2017. A little bit of the timeline here, and I think by bolding some of the city numbers, I think it gives you an example of just the kind of work, the stacks of paper, and the number of contracts that had to come, that were put in place, and all of this coming to fruition. But July 10th, a letter to Mayor Dyer, and then progressively we went from 47 cities down to 40 cities to 31 cities. By January of 2018, so just 13, 14 months ago, our host city declaration and agreements that we had to provide to the United Bid Committee, multiple hosting locations, of course. The event would take place at Camping World Stadium, and we had an airport agreement, a host agreement. There was an awful lot of work that had to be done, and the community came together to support us. And on March 16th, it was made official that 23 North American cities, including Orlando, were part of the bid package that would be submitted to FIFA and then voted on June 13th, 2018. Of course, on June 13th at 5 o'clock in the morning, in Russia, it was voted on, and the North American bid beat out the Moroccan bid for the right to host in North America. This is a really unique opportunity, and I'll get into some of the specifics of this 26 World Cup here in a minute, but what I wanted to impress upon the group today was the next sets of steps that have to happen going forward. In January, we briefed our multiple tourism partners, including CFHLA. In February, we presented to the Orange County Sports Incentive Committee, and the reason we presented to them was we have asked for pursuit funding of $1 million to help us pursue this opportunity. This is a unique situation in that this is not a bid fee so much as this is the funding that we will need to pursue the opportunity over the next 18 months and prepare ourselves for the opportunity to be a host community. And I'll get into a little more detail there. Again, in February, we presented to our local organizing committee, and over the next period of time, we'll present to the iDrive Chamber, we'll present to a number of different stakeholders in the community. We have already met with the major stakeholders in our community to gain their backing and their support of this funding request, but there are a couple of steps as we go forward. In June, we're going to celebrate the 25th anniversary of the World Cup, which was here in 1994. I'm sure all of you can remember the soccer ball that was on top of City Hall. We'll have the All-Star game in July and a series of events that will lead us into a expected decision from FIFA when they announce their official host cities sometime either late in 2020 or the beginning of 2021. And of course, if we're successful, we expect to be, 22, 23, 24 laid out in front of you is the plan and what we will need to do in order to host World Cup in 2026. Some of the feedback from Russia, where the last World Cup happened, 3.572 billion people watched coverage. Over half of the global population were captured, which is remarkable. And then you can see the final itself was watched by 1.12 billion viewers. Early stage matches were watched by an average of 200 million viewers. And to give you some perspective and context, the Super Bowl was watched by a little over 100 million, so twice the audience of the Super Bowl. Some tourism figures from Russia: 5 million tourists, 2.9 international visitors visited Russia, 2.7 million of them visiting Moscow. Some details on Brazil and South Africa in that slide as well. And I want to talk a little bit about the North American resume. You can see on a couple of slides after that. Certainly North America, well thought of, having hosted multiple World Cup events, Olympic events, and some of the logos are represented there. Here's the details, and this is really what we're focused on as a group and as a local organizing committee, along with our partners. There are 23 North American cities left. 16 of those cities will host, so 7 cities will not have the opportunity to host. So we are in a very competitive bid process. Some of the details about the host city candidate stadiums: the average capacity at 68,000. Of course, state-of-the-art amenities and technology for the stadiums, easy access and transportation. The real key, I think, to North America winning this bid was, unlike other bids when you see in Olympics and you see in World Cup, North America didn't need to build new stadiums. We had infrastructure in place. This was not going to be the type of event where we were going to have to build and develop to get to a place where we were able to host this event. What's new about the 2026 World Cup format is, in the past, there have been 32 nations, 32 teams. This next World Cup for us in 26, there's going to be 48 teams in North America, 80 matches instead of 60, and of course there's 500 million neighbors if you add the populations of Mexico, the US, and Canada. And what's really interesting competitively is we've been getting some feedback saying, well, you're going to have a lot of nations, a lot of teams, a lot of groups that are going to come here that have never participated in World Cup, and the competition may be a little bit lopsided in those early rounds. And what we say back is, that's great, because what if one of those nations coming to visit us is India? What if it's China? What if it's some of the nations who have never participated in World Cup, and this is their very first time? And what if it's here in Orlando? What an absolute economic boom that would be for our community to welcome those new nations who have not participated and are not regulars in this particular event to come here and be part of our community, and not just the 15 days that World Cup would be here, but maybe 30 days prior, 30 days after, as they get an opportunity to visit our community. A little bit of the evaluation. There were dozens of pages of evaluations, and we can certainly provide that. But we, of course, not only made the grade when it came to stadiums, but we were ahead of a number of other stadiums as part of this evaluation when the bid group put forward all of our data as it related to Camping World Stadium. And of course, no surprise, on the accommodation side, we ranked at the top of the list when it came to the actual experience that fans were going to have when they came here. So just a little bit of data there, and I wanted to touch on that in that, certainly, and I'm going to get to this in a minute as we talk about stadium, but I think some of the perception or conversation was, okay, comparing us to Atlanta or Dallas or New York or LA, we're not going to have the capacity to host either the opening game or the final matches. What we're concerned with is that initial draw, those initial round games, those first round games. And I think that we grade very well. We certainly grade incredibly well when it comes to accommodations and the way that we host as a community. So one more look at the map. 3 cities in Canada: Edmonton, Montreal, and Toronto. 3 in Mexico: Monterrey, Guadalajara, and Mexico City. and then you've got 17 cities in the United States fighting for those last 10 spots. Is it possible that a city in Canada or Mexico may drop out? Yes, that would open up another slot. But if they don't, if it's 3 and 3, and there's a total of 16 cities, then we're going to be fighting for one of those 10 slots on the U.S. side. There are 3 funding stages that I'd like to share with you today. We touched earlier on the $1 million funding request that we have made of Orange County to help us pursue the opportunity. The second opportunity for us as a community, should we be successful, is what's illustrated on this screen right now. The cost to execute and host, we expect to be somewhere in the neighborhood of $40 to $60 million, which we will expect to raise here in our community through public and private donations. This sort of illustrates and breaks out those expenses, the FIFA Fan Fest, traffic and transportation, marketing and beautification, and of course safety and security. And I think if you take a look at the upper end of some of these expenses, it's important to recognize that New York, LA, some of the larger cities that are still in play here, to secure a 300,000, 400,000, 500,000 fan fest in New York City or LA will require much more expense when it comes to either security or traffic and transportation than it would here in Orlando. So you see that there are very broad ranges, but we wanted to bring that to your attention, that there really are 3 conversations as it relates to funding. The first is the $1 million pursuit. The second is $40 to $60 million here to host. And of course, if there's any conversation about required or recommended changes that can be made to Camping World Stadium. Here's what we're doing. So certainly we have organized, our strategic plan is this. Organize our stakeholders. We have tremendous leaders in this community, certainly led by Mayor Dyer, who have been diligent and proactive and incredibly helpful in helping us pool resources, have the kinds of conversations that need to be had in order to move forward. So the stakeholders are certainly in place. We have to be proactive. We have hired a consultant who, John Christic, out of Premier Partnerships. John led the bid campaign, which was successful over Morocco. He was the bid executive that led that campaign. Address our weaknesses, which are some of the conversations that we're having. Sharpening our pencils. I think the part there that's interesting is, while we're going to need to raise this $40 to $60 million, there are so many parts of this World Cup opportunity in which we are going to be able to drive a certain amount of revenue. And it's important, with John Christic's help and our all of our partners, to know where we can push back and where we can help ourselves to minimize the expense and certainly optimize all of the opportunities. And then we have to be smart. We have to make good selections. And I think the interesting part there is that our competition, all of the other cities, are activating. Houston has chosen a chairman. So has Kansas City. LA and Atlanta are getting ready to announce theirs. And I think it's going to be important for us to come forward here soon to talk about who honorary chair people can be for our community, and start to take advantage of some of the unique opportunities that are to present themselves here in the next 6, 8, 12 months. One that I'd like to make sure that we highlight today is the March 21st U.S. men's national game against Ecuador, which will be just a few days away next Thursday. So going to the base drivers themselves, and just to give you a little bit more information, the projected dates for World Cup in 2026 are June, July of that summer of 26. Should Orlando be chosen, we expect to host 3 to 5 matches, and it's estimated we'd sell out each 70,000. Interesting point, in 1994, the attendance from the 1994 World Cup here in the United States is still the largest attendance on record of all the World Cups, and we have a list that we could share with you. But Russia and Rio and all of the most recent World Cups, that is still the number one. So we expect sellouts for all those matches. And I think it's also important that if we're able to win the 26 World Cup, it's not just matches in 26. There would be test matches in 25. You would have pre-qualifying opportunities for us to host matches for the U.S. team going into that 26. Pre-qualifying matches for the 22 World Cup, which is in Qatar. So a number of opportunities for our community, not just the World Cup. You would ask, well, what happens if we're unsuccessful in getting matches? And the answer is that the good news, in our estimation, all of this time and energy and funding that we are looking to secure would not go for we would have this opportunity to host team-based camps, referee-based camps, competition-related events. There's a preliminary draws and final draws and workshops and Congress. There's a media center. So Orlando will be in the mix. We will have an opportunity. Obviously, our first priority is to have matches be played here, but at the same time, we know that there are additional opportunities, and the work will not, we will make this work for our community. FIFA, just to give you a sense, already has blocked out and secured 69,000 hotel rooms. That does not include fan rooms. So we expect, in addition to the fan hotel rooms, you could be expecting anywhere from 200,000 plus fans to descend upon Orlando for those matches in June of 26. And we estimate that the economic impact ranges from between 600 million to 800 million, of course, depending on the nations that would come and participate here in Orlando. It's probably a good estimate that each match would be worth somewhere in the neighborhood of 150 to 200 million dollars in economic impact. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Great presentation, Jason. It's only 7 years away.
Yeah.
Just don't realize what really goes into some of these bids and hosting these really big events, how much time and energy goes on over such a long period of time. So good work you guys are doing.
Thank you.
Questions, comments? All right, thanks for the update. Commissioner Ings.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Jason. Really enjoyed the presentation. But I guess I had a question concerning the turf. The turf. I know we have artificial turf in Camping World Stadium, but does FIFA require a natural turf?
They do.
Okay, and if they do, what's going to be our procedure to make that happen?
Thank you, Commissioner. Yes, we have synthetic turf, and they would require our regular natural turf. We can do it several different ways. We have done it successfully in the past where we just cover synthetic product and put the natural turf on top of it. If we had to, there'd be expense of removing it and putting in natural turf just for that match.
Okay. The next thing is, of the U.S. competitors, Jason, where do we fit in as number one?
So I think it's important to take, and I mentioned this in my remarks, I think that it's going to become very obvious that stadiums that can handle the opening matches and the final matches are going to be obvious choices. Stadiums that can handle 90+ thousand fans. We expect to see those cities move forward. We don't want to handicap anything because certainly FIFA is going to make those decisions ultimately. I think that there's two ways of looking at the map that I presented today. I think that if they take a clustered approach, so if they take a look and say, you know what, Miami, Orlando, Atlanta, if we cluster those together, if those opening matches that we would have the opportunity to host, it might make an awful lot of sense that for fans and for the clubs themselves, for the teams themselves, to have to travel and circulate through a region, then I think we fit in really well. And I think that's going to be to our advantage to see that to the end and have those kinds of conversations, because if fans are following their team, they're not necessarily staying in Orlando. So if the first match is in Miami, the second match is in Orlando, and the third match is in Atlanta, the ease of access to do that and and that clustered scenario is going to play very well for us. If the opposite is true, and they need to spread it out throughout the, and I can put the map back up, go backwards. I might not be doing this right, but here we go. If you start to look at a spread scenario where they're looking to have the cities as, as far to the northwest as Seattle and to the northeast as Boston, that may not play as well for us. We're hopeful that that clustered scenario is going to be the one that makes the most sense. I think for the fan experience and most certainly for the athlete experience, it would, we feel that it would make the most sense. And we feel that based on the evaluation and how we rank, and I'll tell you a couple of things. The two things that I think are incredibly key for our communities. This community comes together. We are very easy to work with. We are unified in our approach, and maybe not the same could be said of our competitors. And at the same time, I think that our portfolio of hosting these major events over time is going to give us an advantage, and we're certainly going to play to every single competitive advantage that we have as a community. We have great leadership, and we know that we'll be in the running, in the serious running. And we think we've taken initial steps to get there. I think there are additional steps that we will need to take here in the very near future, and I think that we're going to have an incredible opportunity to promote our community when the MLS All-Star Game comes here in July.
So have any FIFA officials made it to Orlando yet to take a look around, maybe talk with
That's a
you
great
guys?
question. No, we have not gotten any indication of when the first site visit will be. And we expect that that site visit itself will be the opportunity for us to showcase ourselves. And we will certainly, that is a big part of the pursuit funding, is to host the kind of site visit that will be needed and necessary to show ourselves as best we can.
Okay, thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Commissioner Stewart.
Thank you, Mayor. Jason, great job. I
Thank you.
appreciate it. I'm looking at the evaluation that they did. We ranked 7th in accommodation, but we ranked 13th in terms of stadium in the United States. Tell me what you think we need to do to the stadium to make the accommodations appropriate. I know there's 68,000, I think, was the
Yeah.
minimum, and then 9,500 in luxury. Okay,
Yep.
Alan, tell us what the.
Thank you, Commissioner. Obviously, the pitch, changing out, and they needed a little more width than we have currently at the stadium, so we'd have to do some construction on the lower bowl to make it a little wider for them. There's a lot of theories about whether we need a roof or not. That's very popular, obviously, in European stadiums and South American stadiums, so that hasn't been mandated as a
You mean roof, you mean some cover over the
fans.
fans?
Yeah. That hasn't been mandated, but obviously that's the competition we're up against, especially if it's not the cluster. Miami and Atlanta both have roofs, so.
We don't rate poorly. I mean, 13th, and the other 12 have NFL stadiums. I mean, so we've done a pretty good job from that standpoint.
Yes, sir, we have.
All right, good. All right, thank you very much. Jason, the other thing is, do you expect to get the $1 million from the tourist development for the seed money now?
So the steps we've taken thus far, certainly we've met with tourism leaders. We obtained a letter of support, unanimous support from CFHLA. We've had, in February, we met in front of the Sports Incentive Committee. They voted unanimously to move this opportunity to the Board of County Commissioners. Mayor Demings has asked us to present to TDC just to share the information with that group as well. And we're hopeful that we'll have that vote. I would imagine the TDC meeting's on March 27th. So sometime thereafter, we will have, some conversation back and forth with the attorneys at Orange County about the agreement, and then hopefully have that in place in April for a final vote.
Oh, good, thank you. And then, once that's done, you're now beginning to gear up with the I guess, the advertising crew or the marketing coordinators to move that forward?
Yes, Commissioner. In fact, we've had a number of preliminary meetings to start to brainstorm and make sure that we use all the assets in this community. I mean, a perfect example, we had Commissioner Ings was there, a number of city employees were there. At our local organizing committee meeting on February 12th, I think we had almost 100 local community leaders in the room that day to get an update, and we feel that with all the great resources that we have here in the community, we'll put a great plan in place. We'll have the funding to do it, most importantly. And yes, everything from, you know, the way that we stage the facility for the welcome and all of the local and national attention that we'll need to garner. Like I said, some of that's going to be able to happen organically through that MLS All-Star Game. But if the site visit isn't until later in the fall or even the following year, we need to have momentum around that site visit and be ready when they come here. I think that the story is absolutely the most important part. I think that ultimately this dialogue and this story that we're going to tell about whether it's considerations, I mean, Kansas City, frankly, just completely put it right out there on Friday and said they are going to reconfigure their lower bowl. Here's what we're going to do. Here are all the things that we're going to do as a community to make our best effort. And I think as we develop that dialogue and talk about the story that we're going to tell as a community, we'll be more than prepared when the time comes.
Thank you very much. Great job.
Jason, has there been any conversation at all about increasing the number of cities? I know at one point we thought there were going to be 12 or 14 American cities, and it decreased to 10.
I think, you know, it's such a great question because as we went through the contract process at every step with FIFA, the last line of every contract is we have the right to change, you know, what we're doing. So I think that we're cognizant of it. We know that Edmonton was in and Vancouver was out at the last minute and Chicago was out at the last minute, and there were some interesting changes that happened when we saw that final group that was put together in March of 18. So nothing that's been said to us and nothing that we've heard that's been back-channeled to us indicates that it'll be anything different than 16 out of the 23 cities thus far.
Okay, thanks so much.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay.
Reggie, we ready to go on census? Okay. Reggie's going to lead us in a workshop on the U.S. Census, which is right around the corner in 2020. And we know that Orlando was certainly an undercount community during the last census, and so many of the federal formulas, well, and state formulas for that matter, are based on a census count. We want to make sure that we do everything we can to make sure all our citizens are counted.
Thanks again, Alan. Good morning, Mayor, City Commissioners, and guests here in our council chambers, and those who may be watching our broadcast. The decennial census happens every 10 years and it records populations and housing in the U.S., Washington, D.C., Puerto Rico, and the Virgin Islands. The U.S. Census Bureau conducts this study on Census Day, which will be April 1st, 2020. According to the Bureau, the first census was directed by Thomas Jefferson in 1790 and has been organized every 10 years since then. The U.S. had almost 4 million people at that time, and Congress used the results to allocate 105 seats in the House of Representatives to 15 states. Along with the census, an economic census and census of governments are conducted every 5 years. The data collected for the census helps determine a number of factors in government, schools, communities across the country, including the distribution of congressional seats to states, the appropriations of seats in the U.S. House of Representatives, the composition of legislative districts, schools, district assignment areas, and other fundamental areas of government, like municipalities. The census distributes more than $675 billion in federal funds to local, state, and tribal governments annually for services such as elder services, building new roads, bridges, schools, locating job training, youth and family programs. This data states and communities in allocating funds for neighborhood improvements, public health, education, transportation. Therefore, conducting an accurate 2020 census is a priority of our mayor and our city council for every resident. Today, I am pleased to introduce Sheena Lord, our partnership specialist from the Atlanta Regional Census Center, who will brief you on the 2020 Census Complete Count process. Attorney Lord.
Good morning, Mayor, Commissioners.
Good morning. Welcome.
Thank you very much, Reggie, for the intro. I'm going to touch on some of those points and just give you a background about the
Can you
census.
lift that mic
Oh,
up
I'm
just a
sorry.
hair?
Is that better?
That's better.
Okay, excellent. I'm going to just touch on some of the points that Reggie spoke on and get a little bit more in depth and let you know where we are, what's new about this census, and what's happening going forward. Oh, wait. How do we put it up there, Reggie? Oh, there we go. Perfect. Thank you. So as Reggie touched on, the census is very important. It's extremely important to our local governments, our cities, our counties, our municipalities, and that's for several reasons. The governments typically will get involved a little earlier with LUCA, which is our local update canvassing of address, where we talk about boundaries, what's new in the counties and the cities, and they update that. So that's something that's been worked on already. They also assist us with recruiting census workers, as well as forming complete count committees. Why is it our local governments have a vested interest? There are two reasons. First is the power. The Constitution population counts are responsible for determining our allocation. They determine how many seats we have in the House. In 2010, we gained 2 additional seats. We're now the 3rd largest state, and they're projected to gain 2 additional seats in the 2020 census. The other very important item is the federal funding that is determined by the census population. These federal programs that are determined by these dollars are things such as adoption assistance, Head Start, Pell Grants, disabled veterans, firefighters, roadways, and construction. There's a number of various programs that are affected by these federal dollars. All of those dollars are determined by the census population. In Florida, we're talking something to the tune of $29 billion. That's a considerable amount that comes to the state, the county, and the city, and the municipalities. These are the percentages of what we did in 2010. In 2010, 72% of Orange County responded to the census. So there's a considerable amount that did not respond. That is a large amount of dollars that were left on the table for Florida. Here is a map where you can see what I was speaking in 2010. These are the states that gained additional seats and some that lost. You can see that Florida gained 2 seats. And there's other projections for 2020. Again, we're estimated to gain 1 or 2 additional seats. Why is the 2020 census different? This is going to be the first year that self-response, primary method of responding, is going to be online. So you can respond via smartphone, iPad, or computer. The secondary response method is going to be a 1-800 number. This 1-800 number is going to be staffed with approximately 27 languages. They are looking to increase the amount of languages that they do offer. But you can call this number to get assistance with completing your census form or complete it over that phone as well. The traditional questionnaire is the third method. You can request one should you need one, but the primary method is online. So we are going to be working with our local counties and cities to open things like public libraries, career sources, and other entities that are willing to donate. Oh, sorry. Thanks. Is that better? Sure. Other entities that are willing to donate computer space so people can come in and respond. There are a few things that are important to note about the census. We never ask for a social security number, money, or donations. We never send requests on behalf of any political party, and we never request any sensitive information such as passcodes or PINs. The census data is extremely protected. The reason is they understood that if people did not feel comfortable in responding to the census, then we wouldn't get an accurate population count. And the population count is important for all the aforementioned reasons. The protections that are afforded the information in the census is Title 13, which states that this information is confidential. It's not shared with any other governmental entity. The only time census data is shared is in the aggregate. So they're not reporting on any particular individual, but rather census tracts and regions. That's how the numbers are reported. They also are protected because they're sealed for 72 years. By the time the information is made public, most people really don't care anyway. So that's kind of the protections that are built into the system for the census data. What are our impediments to a successful enumeration? The census calls them hard to count areas. These are areas that we have designated and realized that have a lower response score. There are several indicators that let us know where our hard to count areas are. Things such as high concentration of renters, if English is not the primary language in the home, large amounts of small children, high crime, single parents. There's a number of factors that we've been able to identify within our hard to count populations. These are some additional factors. This is what we call a low response score. This can be used, comes from a tool called Roam that's available on the census website, where you can actually drill down by census tract to see what pockets are hard to count. The more orange the area is, the harder to count it is. That means they have a lower response score. These are also census tracts with low response scores of 25% or higher, which means that in these particular areas, there's a large percentage of people that tend to not answer the census. Our outreach plan. The census has established what we call complete count committees. We find that this is the best way to reach out to the local residents of any particular region or area. Complete count committees are a group of trusted voices from within the region that come together to form a plan on how best to reach their residents. The complete count committee is typically the highest elected official of a particular given area, appoints a liaison. The liaison then works with the census staff, partnerships such as myself, and we work with getting a complete count committee established. There are subcommittees on this complete count committee. There might be one for small business, education, unique populations indigenous to that area, faith-based. These subcommittees are then going to come up with a strategy and a best way to communicate the information about the census to their population. We find that when someone like myself comes, I'm here from Orange County locally, however, you don't particularly know me. However, they know our mayor, they know our commissioners, and they know other leaders within the community. So when we partner with them, we're able to reach residents a little bit more, and they understand and accept the information a little bit better, and they feel more comfortable asking questions and responding. So we found that this is a method that typically works best. And this is just more information about the Complete Count Committee. We also have what we call community complete count committees, which typically you find these much more in our rural areas, where sometimes it's not necessarily a state or a county or a city complete count committee, but they might be pillars of that particular rural area. They will come together to form a complete count committee. The complete count committee is really just about ensuring that we have ways to reach our residents and that the information is being disseminated through the proper channels. This is a census design. We establish where we count, that's LUCA, which is what we talked about, which we work with local governments. We then motivate people to respond, that is the education phase, what we're doing now. We then go into counting the population, which will start early spring, and then we release the count December. So they're due on the president's desk in December, and they're released in aggregate the following spring. So that gives you an idea of kind of where we are in this process. The other important component of the census is the jobs. We hire from the regions in which people will be working. So if you're going to be working in Orange County, you typically are of and from Orange County. If you're going to be working in Alachua, you'll be from Alachua. We do that because residents are most familiar with their communities. They know what's going on, and they're able to work within their communities. So we definitely hire from those areas and to work with the area census offices. We definitely have some things to attract also because they are temporary jobs. We pay weekly, a little higher pay rate, so that way people are excited about coming to work with the census. Any questions?
Commissioner Sheehan?
Yes, and thank you. One of the concerns that I have is that, you know, that we have some folks that are undocumented, and their concern is that they're going to have immigration enforcement action taken against them if they report. And I think that's one of the reasons why we have lower report numbers, is because a lot of people do come here to Orlando. And then we have United States citizens who are Puerto Rico who are here.
Right.
And then we have people in Puerto Rico, and then they're not, who, they don't even have the infrastructure over there. So we've got family members here, we've got undocumented residents here, we've got all these kinds of issues. How can we assure them, the undocumented people, that enforcement action is not going to be taken against them? And then the other part of the equation is, how are we going to help count the, Puerto Rican community and people like that who are here, and make sure that they are counted? Because unfortunately, I think there's been and my other colleagues can probably speak, well, no, he's not here. But I think it's important to bring this up in terms of the Hispanic community, that they are going to be counted, and that they don't have to fear being counted.
Absolutely, Commissioner. One of the things that we do, and why we work so hard in the education phase and why we start so early, is so that people understand the process of the census. The protections that were afforded census data were given for that very reason. Our forefathers understood that if we don't have an accurate count, we cannot get the resources to the proper cities, counties, and areas where the resources are needed. So part of that is why we work with complete count committees. So that way people understand that the data is not given on any specific person. It is not shared with any other governmental agency. It is reported in the aggregate level. So we work very hard to communicate that. We also work very hard so that way with our complete count committees, we might have a subcommittee that focuses specifically on these unique populations. So that unique population here in the city of Orlando would be one that we would definitely want to communicate. We want to ensure that they understand that this information is protected and that we do need to count them. Because at the end of the day, if you have 10 people coming to a dinner party, but you only have resources for 8, you're not sufficiently prepared. So we at the census, as well as the federal government, have an interest in making sure that we do have an accurate and complete count. So that's why we do partner with our complete count committees, our local leaders, different organizations that are very familiar with that particular population, so that way they are getting this information from people that they trust and understand are doing things for their best interests.
We do have the Hispanic Office of Local Assistance. Is there a way maybe to, because there's a lot of people who come through HOLA and they've accessed services, is there a way maybe to partner if they've got family members who are still in Puerto Rico, as an example, that might not be counted because they don't have power? They're not going to have access to phones or power still, some areas of Puerto Rico.
Yes. So part of that is why we are definitely working with, so we do start with the counties, the cities, and municipalities. However, we do branch into the communities. We are going to be going onto a community level, into the community agencies, faith-based, and other entities to get that information out. And like I said, you can still request a traditional questionnaire, which is going to be paper. We are also working in different areas to ensure that there are places that people can go and know that these places are available for them to use the resources to report themselves. You want to jump in, Reggie?
I simply just wanted to say, Mayor and Commissioners, that we will definitely have a complete count committee. And obviously, we're looking to you as the Mayor and Commissioners to help us identify persons. 20 years ago, that's how I got involved. It was Mayor Hood who appointed me as the chair of the complete count committee. And then obviously 10 years later, as a staff person, we worked. Internally, we're going to have a committee. Clearly, we can't do this without our planning department. Obviously, our multicultural, our community affairs, our communications, our housing, our homeless. We've got to be creative in terms of trying to get to those persons who are afraid of the census because they just don't know much about it. And you know that, most of you know that I was born in Paramore and grew up in Paramore. Obviously, we want to get persons who live in Paramore to lead the effort as it relates to if we have the opportunity to go door to door. What Sheena did not say is we're approaching this totally different than what we've done before because of computer, because of the social media. But we also recognize that many persons in this hard to enumerate area are not individuals who really use computers. And so we're going to have to be creative to make sure that and it's no dark secret that here in Orlando and the greater Central Florida area, we're a melting pot. Not only are we very, very concerned about our Hispanic population, but also our Caribbean population, i.e. our Haitian population. So we want to get persons that represent those areas as well. And so that's why the Complete Count Committee can be a valuable tool, and we'll look for each one of you to assist us in their role in terms of identifying persons. This year, it'll be a little different, because initially, 10 years ago, 20 years ago, there was an Orlando Orange County Complete Count Committee. Orange County is growing more municipalities, so they have their separate committee, and we'll have ours. I'm sure there'll be some other cities in this region that will also have a Complete Count Committee. Hopefully that answers.
And as a member of the LGBTQ community, I would be remiss not to mention that there were concerns about counting of same-gender married households. Is that not going to happen on this census?
Everyone is going to be counted,
They will be counted, but they won't be
regardless of
counted
status.
But will they be counted as a subset? Because that was important census data.
That is one of the questions that's up. They have until June, along with the citizenship question, to determine what questions will actually be on the census. We haven't been given that directive. They have until June. As soon as we are given that information, we will definitely be communicating that with our partners.
Is there a way as community leaders to have input on the citizenship question, as well as whether LGBTQ same-sex households marriage should be counted? Is there a way for us to have input on that?
Yes, it's going through the legislative process, but I can
Okay.
get a contact and forward to you
Okay.
as to who is spearheading that particular effort.
Thank you. Thanks, Mayor.
Commissioner Stewart?
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Obviously, all of us are concerned about each of us is involved in different pockets of the community, especially in our own districts,
Right.
where we have a challenge. One of those is the homeless population I'm involved with. We're prepared to step up and do whatever you need for us to do, especially in terms of online. I know that at my particular location, 300 people a day show up. So we have a chance to be able to reach into a poverty portion of our community that's not there. There also are you familiar with the point-in-time counts?
No.
Okay. Every year, and it lasts to January, there's a point-in-time count that counts homeless population.
Oh, yes, I'm sorry. Yes, I apologize.
Yeah,
Yes.
point in time.
Mhm.
So there's a whole structure around that needs to be engaged somehow in this process. One quick, I guess my brain kind of goes to accounting. So how do you know, if we did the census, how do you know we were underreported? What do you do that based upon a previous estimate and we were just kind of going after it, or do you? I mean, how do you? You're kind of caught in kind of an oxymoron. We counted, but we know you're undercounted.
Right, so I'll address this in two parts. Let me first address the homeless count. The homeless count has a very specific initiative, and they do work very heavily
Good.
with all of the organizations that do that snapshot in time, so that way they are on the ground with those. So that is a separate entity, such as group quarters, which counts dorms, jails, things of that nature. So there are a few smaller segments that have very specific methods by which they're counted, so homeless and group quarters are a part of that, so we can get you more information on that. But they are counted in a very different format, because obviously it's a very different
Good.
population, but it is addressed. The second part of that question is, the census isn't just every 10 years. The census is also doing the American Community Survey. So you get these surveys that might call and ask you, how many hours of TV do you watch a week? Have you ever owned a business? How many employees did you have? That information is being collected throughout the decade. So it gives them a sense of how many people are happening. They also have projections that they have been working on, and so they are constantly updating these numbers. So they have a general idea of approximately how many people are there, and when they realize that it comes under is where that undercount does come from.
Okay, good. Thank you. Well, all of us would stand ready to help any way we can.
Thank you.
I know how important it is to have the corrected numbers, active numbers, especially when it comes back to benefits to the community. And two areas concern me is the areas of, I guess, generally the welfare areas and the poverty counts, as well as the community block grants. Those two areas have an incredible impact on our community, and we all stand ready to help. So,
We
Reggie,
appreciate
you hear that? Okay, all right, let's go.
Commissioner Rings?
Thank you, Mayor. Ms. Lloyd, thank you for your presentation. Reggie, thank you, and thank your guests for being here as well. But, when you talk about jobs, my ears are just really open for that, because there's so many people that are looking for job opportunities. So what's the method that you're going to go and try to recruit people for these jobs? And I know that you have this piece that you apply online. but can you just tell me a little bit more about that?
Absolutely. So recruiting is the sister arm of what we call partnership. Partnership is what we do with education. Recruitment is its entirely separate track, but they have been on the ground. We have area census offices that are opening currently, and they have been working with career sources. They've been working with local employment agencies. They've been on the ground at churches. They are getting the information out to as many people as possible to ensure that people are applying for the jobs, because we do want people from the areas. We have reports that come out very specifically down to the county level and the city level as to how many people are applying, where we need to focus our efforts, and they have a very broad plan to make sure that they are getting to residents, so that way residents do know that these jobs are available for them.
Okay. So for Orlando, Orange County, someone will be dedicated strictly to the city limits of Orlando and these other municipalities, and then also with the county, or how does that?
So with recruiting, the way it works is we have what we call an area census office. There is one for Orange County specifically. Kathia is over that. She is a recruiting manager. She then has recruiting assistants. The recruiting assistants then go throughout the county and throughout the city in Orange to ensure that they're working with everyone to know and to get the jobs out there. So their area census offices is how they're centered, and they deal in that particular geographic area. There's another one for Gainesville, there's another one for Duval, so they handle everything under that umbrella. So the recruiting manager will have anywhere from 6 to 10 RAs, which are recruiting assistants, and then they go out and they're constantly recruiting. They're constantly having open houses where you can come and actually apply for the job on the spot.
So kickoff campaign, when does that start?
Kickoff campaign for the jobs or for partnership?
For a partnership?
All right, as soon as you guys appoint a liaison, then we'll be looking to have a kickoff for the complete count committee.
Okay, and where is the office gonna, the local office gonna be located?
The area census office?
Yes.
I don't have, Chancellor Drive? Chancellor Drive.
Okay,
It's being built currently.
it's being built?
Yes.
All right, I'm ready.
Excellent, thank you.
Reggie, do you have something further?
I just want to say, Mayor, that we'll make sure that we get that employment number to all of the commissioners and obviously your office, Mayor, as well. We've already done some hiring locally. Help me out with the first name again. Saraya is going to be will be in charge of our Hispanic outreach. And I think most of you already know Barbara Newton, who will serve, really, she'll be our partnership specialist for this area, Orlando and Orange County. So she used to be the executive director of the POPS program, and also most recently was an employee of Orange County government. So.
Thank you so much. We look forward to working with you over the course of the next, 18 months or so, I guess.
Definitely. I thank you all for allowing us to have a few moments to talk about the census. Have a great day.
Thank you. Do we have any students in attendance today? Would you guys please stand and let us recognize you? Thanks for being here, Valencia. Okay, that concludes our workshop for today.
Safety. Did you know you must stop for a pedestrian in the crosswalk?